Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Country Education Partnership free professional development series. My name is Brendan Ryan. Country Education Partnership acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which our schools, our families and our communities work and play. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, traditions, culture and hope of First Nations peoples across our nation. Welcome everybody to the second in the autumn series of professional development. Our topic today is returning graduate teachers, what you can do. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the Chief Executive Officer of the CEP, Mark McLean. Mark.
Thank you, Brendan. Yes, looking forward to today's session very much. In CEP news, we do have our AGM next Monday in Melbourne, which anyone is invited to attend, 11:30 to 1 at the Radisson on Flagstaff. Now, we know AGMs can often be a slightly bland affair, and I tend to avoid them as well for fear of being given a job. However, we're really excited our session. We are going to have a bit of self-indulgence, CEP, and have life member John Stafford, who will take us through the history of our organisation to how we came to be in the first place. That session will be recorded and available on our website, and I know anyone who's into the history of organisations will be fascinated with that. And the other thing, I just want to give a shout out to our students and staff who've returned to school at Pomona School just recently. I know that area lost a number of houses, including many of the students at school have lost their houses in the recent fire. Quite a traumatic time, and the smell of smoke is still very prevalent around the area, which must be quite triggering for the students who are there. So our thoughts go out to that rural CEP school, dealing with that tragedy and the ongoing effects that I'm sure will be there for a while. So our thoughts are certainly with them at the moment. So back to you, Brendan.
Thanks, Mark. Now, today's session involves normal housekeeping arrangements. The session will take exactly 1 hour, so we will conclude by 5 p.m. The program is being recorded, so there's an opportunity to review the session at your convenience. And I make the point that previous sessions are also online and available. If you have a question, could you please include that in the chat box, and we'll endeavour to respond to those questions today. And before you conclude the session, we would encourage you to complete the survey. We have a very brief survey which we'd like participants to complete before signing off. So I'll hand back to you, Mark, to introduce our guests and facilitate today's session.
Thank you, Brendan. We're very privileged today to have two members of Federation University who are going to share with us a study that was released in 2021, probably the work around it, I guess, went on in 2020. Sharon Davis is here today, a lecturer in the education faculty at Federation University, an ex-primary teacher and principal, spent a fair bit of time in Queensland by the looks of it, and a little foray over to London at some point, which I'm sure was exciting. Sharon certainly got some more teaching to do tonight. She shares with us till about 8 or 9 o'clock tonight, so busy day for her. We also have Jenene Burke with us, who I believe is acting Executive Dean at the moment, if I got that right, yes. Former secondary school teacher herself. And before I pass over to Sharon and Jenene, their studies around the Will I Stay or Will I Go, the regional, rural, remote, addressing teacher shortages through a framework for attracting, supporting and retaining graduate teachers. And I guess the things I'm most looking forward to are whether that concept of attracting country people into the roles, people who already come from rural backgrounds, what was found there, the impact of online social networks, how important that is, how important community engagements activities are. And the other thing, which I guess is prevalent to me, is I'm quite worried in rural Victoria, there's a lot less organised sport around, a lot less volunteers, and I feel like the opportunities for young people are less, and I'm also interested to whether that has any impact on whether they originally go there or stay. So they're just some of the thoughts that jump in my mind that I'm really keen to hear about and learn. But without further ado, I shall pass over to Sharon and Jenene to present to us today.
Jenene, you're muted. No. No. I just need a different microphone, I think.
Might need a bit of padding from you, Sharon.
Yes, I was just thinking. I'll just fill. And yes, you're right, Mark. I did teach in London for a year. I'd been a teacher, I think, for about, because in Queensland it's still a centralised system, so you do your country service, like used to happen in Victoria, I believe, once upon a time. And I think I'd taught for about 6 or 7 years by that point. And then I went and taught in London for a year. It was a fantastic experience. I still think about it now, actually. And then came back and went into small schools. And so really most of my teaching has been, apart from the year in London, has been in rural settings. And certainly this is a real, obviously, a passion of mine, a real interest of mine. I talk to students all the time about the benefits of teaching in regional and rural schools and what they're missing out on, I guess. So how are you going, Jenene? Can we hear you? No. If you want, if it's easier, you're welcome to come to my office and talk from here.
Jenene, I don't know if you've got the same.
No, we got you. We got Jenene there.
I just had the wrong microphone, the wrong thing selected. Can you see the screen now? Because I've also put that up.
Yes,
we can.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that we're meeting on today. Sharon and I, we're in Wathaurong, on Wathaurong lands, and we extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and First Nations peoples, particularly in light of the things that have been happening in Victoria lately with bushfires, etc. And I think we're all feeling that the land is struggling at the moment. So what we'd like to talk about today is a project that we completed in 2019 and 2020. So heading into the pandemic and beyond it. It was funded by the Department of Education Victoria under an Attraction and Retention Innovation Grant. And we haven't actually shared this beyond the Education Department except for at 2 conferences, but we certainly haven't published in the area. So the study was to address teacher shortages in regional, rural and remote schools. So what we aim to do with this project, we called it Will I Stay or Will I Go? Regional, Rural or Remote, addressing teacher shortages through a framework for attracting, supporting and retaining graduate teachers. So what we aim to do was look at the factors that impact on teachers seeking employment in regional, rural and remote schools in Victoria, and to better understand how schools can be made more attractive as preferred sites of employment for young graduate teachers. And we also wanted to identify the facets of school leadership and practice that were effective in recruiting and retaining teachers. So that's what we've got to show you today, some information from that study. So I'll just quickly go through what the methodology was, but I won't dwell too much on this because I think you'll be very excited when you see what we've done with this. So basically we sent surveys out to our students. We put them in, these are our students who are exiting from our university. So they were our graduating students. So as they completed their studies, in 2019 and 2020, we sent them a survey. And then we also asked some of the students to participate in a focus group, which gave us some richer data that we could use for this study. So basically we had, I'll just flick over so that you can see. So these are the numbers of students that we looked at. So probably this column here, the full responses column in the middle, is the interesting one, because there were 96 students who completed the survey and 12 who participated as focus group participants. So the students that we, or graduate teachers who participated were mainly BEd students, so 4-year qualified primary students, but we also had a good cohort of the BEd secondaries, that's the third column along, and also the MTeach secondary students as well. So bachelor degrees being 4 years, Master of Teaching degrees being 2 years on top of an existing bachelor degree, so 5-year qualified teachers. So the students that we looked at were about 26% were males, 72% were females, with one who preferred not to say. We had one Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person and one who declined to answer. All had English as a first language. And the interesting thing, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute, that approximately 3/4 of these students identified their place of birth or their hometown as being regional or rural. So if we look at the ages, 59% of them, which was the majority, were young, aged between 20 to 24. 19% of them were up to 29, and the next biggest group was 15% aged over 40. I would think that the over 40s were mainly the master's students. So there was 3 people who were 50 and over. So the MTeach cohort accounted for most of the older pre-service teachers, or PST being the abbreviation for pre-service teachers. And we also had the focus group interviews, but we won't worry too much about that one because I don't think that's really important for the sake of this presentation. So the question that we first asked ourselves were, where do our students come from and how does this influence their decisions around the locations? And I think this is particularly important for this study. So we questioned ourselves about how we worked out where people came from. And I kind of used my own experience here because I was born in a very small country town in the Wimmera, but my parents moved to Ballarat when I was 14, and I also lived in the city for a year. So when anyone asked me where I came from, it was really hard for me to say, because my parents also moved on and left me behind in Ballarat at one point. So we actually asked them to tell us 2 things: where were they born and what they considered their hometown to be. And we felt that was really important because your hometown is where you go back to. It's where you have, where your roots are, where your friends are, where your family is, maybe. So basically, the place of birth, 97% of our participants were born in Australia, and fewer than 1/3 of them were born in the metropolitan area. So 2/3 of them were born in regional and rural Victoria. But when we asked them about their hometown, there were more of them who identified with coming from regional, rural and remote areas, RRR areas, so 24% metro, which is about 1/4. So I think that's really interesting because I think if we'd done this study with students who are in metropolitan universities, we would have got totally different data. And I think that's really important for one of the conclusions that we've drawn from this study. So one of the really interesting things that we noticed is that when the students went out and did their final practicum, they did it very close to their hometowns. And I'll give you some examples. We've put some examples there. For instance, if the hometown was Traralgon and people lived in Traralgon, they didn't necessarily do their practicum in Traralgon. But in the case of some students, they did it in Morwell or Churchill. The Warrnambool student did it in Koroit. A student from Clunes did practicums in Ballarat and Creswick, all within half an hour of Clunes. A student from Inverleigh did their practicum at Lethbridge, and a student from Pakenham who lived in Longwarry did practicums in Bunyip, Narre Warren, Koorierup and Pakenham, which was interesting. The majority of, so their hometown was not always their place of birth. Students were also asked whether they currently had friends and family in their hometown, and the vast majority confirmed that they had family and friends in their hometown. 90% family, 94% family, 95% friends. So PSTs generally completed a final practicum in or within an hour's drive of their hometown. And I think you'd find with metro students, get a fairly similar result. More than 80% of our respondents completed their final practicum in a regional, rural or remote school. So the first question we asked them is, where would you like to teach when you graduate? And this is pretty interesting because this is pre-pandemic and it's pre-desperate teacher shortage times. So 95% of them said that they intended to teach when they graduated, 14% were unsure, and one student actually said no, they didn't intend to teach at all. But there could be reasons for that. For instance, they could be pregnant, or there could be lots of other reasons. Travelling is another one. And note that a lot of the students were from Gippsland, and they sort of gave us the area. So we've got inner Gippsland, which is this big grey area. Gippsland not specified, which is the gold area to the right of that. Outer Gippsland. Some of them were very happy to teach anywhere. Some wanted to actually go very remote, such as Arnhem Land or the Tiwi Islands. And then we asked them what sort of tenure were they seeking, which is very interesting. 75% of them wanted full-time and ongoing teaching. But the thing that really shocked me at the time was that 20% wanted to begin with casual relief teaching. And when we did the survey, the question, the interviews, we asked them why did they want to begin with casual relief teaching, and they said they wanted to keep their options open, which I found to be absolutely fascinating, because you get more money if you've got a job and you can kickstart your career a lot quicker. So why would 1 in 5 of them want to start casual relief teaching? And 5 of them were unsure. They just wanted to get their degrees done and get on with it. Probably the most telling slide we've got, which I think you will be very interested in, is this one. So we asked them what was important to them when they were applying for a teaching position. In other words, what were they looking for in a school? Now, if you look at where the yellow highlighting is, these were the answers. So we gave them a Likert scale, and they had to indicate the level of importance of each of these factors on a Likert scale. And when we analysed the results, anything that came out with a 4 or above out of 5 is coloured in yellow, and anything that was least important to the entire group is green. So the perceived importance of factors affecting them applying for a teaching position were the quality of school leadership, the quality of the school mentoring program, the likelihood of ongoing employment, their own children's schooling if they had any, lifestyle opportunities in the school that they went to, and opportunities to progress more rapidly in their jobs. And note that the lowest rating, which was far lower than any other rating in the survey, was the reputation of the school was least important to them. So I think that was really interesting, and that certainly shook us up a little bit, because we didn't expect those results. We thought it might be to do with the class sizes or actually the subsidies, but that's not what they said. So then we asked them what were the factors that help graduate teachers to decide if they'll stay in their current teaching location. And again, actually I've reversed the colours this time. The things that they thought were most important were affordable housing, quality of the school mentoring program, the quality of the school leadership, the likelihood of ongoing employment. And the least important things to them were having friends in the area, feeling connected to the area, again, the reputation of the school, and rural remote allowances and subsidies. Now, I think you'll find that's pretty interesting. And we actually found that quite surprising, because that's not what we expected, that these young people who were about to graduate, or actually it was at graduation that we spoke to them, or just beforehand, that they came up with this. Sharon, I'm going to pause there. Is there anything that you'd like to say at this point?
No, I think you've covered it really well. I think that it feeds back really nicely to what Mark was saying at the beginning about what he sees about rural opportunities and what's happening in towns and so forth, and how that plays into attracting both PSTs and retaining grads. Thanks, Jenene.
So I think Mark's going to like this next one, because we also asked them about, I'm sorry, I've got a little bit of background stuff here. I'll just get rid of that. We asked them what were the community engagement activities that appealed to participants, and 21 mentions of sporting clubs and events, and community events in general. But they weren't so interested in things like online social networks, book clubs, cooking activities, scouts, church groups or skateboarding. But sporting clubs and events and community events were the sorts of things that they were really looking for when they went out into their careers. So I hope that scratches the itch there, Mark, in terms of the sporting clubs and events. We asked about community engagement. So this is data now that came through the interviews. I'll sort of move into the interview data. And one of the students said, I can't emphasise enough the importance of having a rapport with students. And another one said, as I have family and community engagement in sporting opportunities, community engagement in sporting opportunities and local clubs is important. The ability for my family as a unit to fit into the new environment and to make social connections and new friendships is important. So I guess what you can say is that pre-service teachers or graduate teachers are actually looking for a lifestyle, a good life, you know, a life where they can afford the housing, where they can have great things to do, where they can have friends and relationships, but they're not necessarily established relationships that they're looking for. They're quite happy to go out there and to forge new ones. So one of the themes that came out of the data in the interviews that we held with the students, the focus groups, was that they actually had a preference for teaching in regional, rural and remote schools. Now, we felt this might have been because of the cohort of students that we spoke to, you know, 75 to 80% of them having roots in regional rural areas. So they were looking for, in their preference for regional, rural and remote schools, they wanted the relationships between teachers and students and the lifestyle. So if you look at the sort of comments that they've given there, you know, whether you're a teacher in Ballarat or Melbourne, you're going to get paid the same. You get a lot more bang for your buck in Ballarat. Going from a small school to regional, massive differences. Teachers that do 3 or 4 different subject areas compared to teachers that do just one. Even just the way the school is set up, the communication between teachers, how their staff room and offices are set up is nice. It was good to see both sides of it. And one of them said that they see themselves settled down with kids that attend the same school they teach at, happy and healthy. So there's a real sense of lifestyle coming through that one. I love being in a small school where you know every teacher, where you know all the students. Some teachers hate it, but I personally, as someone who's doing PE, really enjoy having a bit of a connection between community and school. Here's the footy one on the left-hand side here, opportunities for teachers in rural schools. So after being at North Secondary College, going to the footy on the weekend, they're all playing footy, they're coming up and saying, hi miss, how are you? Having that community and knowing everyone, especially with all the things we talk about, differentiation, building relationships, about all those things. I feel like it's just so much more impactful in smaller schools, or I can make a bigger impact. So I guess this question is perhaps more for us. We wanted to know if their university experience influenced them to teach in regional, rural or remote schools, and the sort of comments they made were, yes, being part of a regional school placement helped me to see and experience the great opportunities for teachers and communities in regional schools. Being part of a school and overall community on placement influenced me further. However, I was already planning on staying there due to my own ties with the community. And then someone else said, no, I need to work in a rural area because that's where I live and my children are established here. So if teachers have got children, they kind of really need to put their children's lifestyles and happiness really high up on the list. So they want to make sure that when they accept a job, they don't want to disrupt their children and uproot them too much. They want it to be somewhere nearby. And if they're from a regional area, that's an easy ask. I won't read the other two because I think they're more about placements. So I've just got a couple of slides now where we're going to summarise the findings from the focus group data. So one of the things that we noticed was that graduate teachers were actively seeking positions in rural and regional schools, but note that these participants were predominantly born or considered that their hometown was in a rural, regional or remote area. Graduate teachers saw the role of the school in supporting them through mentoring and a culture consistent with their own aspirations as keys to transitioning into the profession. The capacity for small rural schools to support graduate teachers was a concern for them. However, they anticipated that they could see a role for the school in connecting new teachers to the local community. And graduate teachers with family commitments and mortgages were mainly seeking positions that would enable them to commute from their current location. And aspirations, this is an interesting one. I haven't talked too much about this, but this was quite considerably discussed in the data. Aspirations for future leadership roles in schools varied, although the PSTs, graduate teachers, articulated that a pathway was open should they choose it. Mature age graduate teachers were conscious of the need to step into schools that were compatible with their philosophy for learning and teaching and where they could fully engage in their professional lives. And overall, the focus group participants were positive about living and working in regional and rural school communities. They did not consider the job outside the metropolitan as a default choice. In fact, one of the students said, "Why would I go and live in the city? I don't want to live amongst the pollution and the traffic when I can live somewhere in a regional location." So there's a few implications of this. So I'll just sort of read them quickly. So graduate teachers from hometowns in regional and rural Victoria tend to live in or near their hometown while studying, and also when completing their final immersion practicum. PSTs from rural and regional hometowns and abodes would like to teach in regional and rural schools. The implication is that they retain their family, social and economic connections throughout their education experience with the intention of applying to teach for schools in or near when they live and graduate. And I think that one of the implications for me is, and I'm going to say it here in this group, I think that when we're thinking about this sort of metro-centric approach where we think that we have to get the pool of teachers from the city and take the city teachers and send them out into the country and hopefully they'll stick, I think is actually the wrong approach. I think that what this study shows is that we need to be recruiting into teacher education from regional and rural areas so that those people will come in, do their teacher education and then go back into rural and regional areas. And I think that came really strongly through this study because of the people we spoke to, who were the people who came from regional and rural areas. I think I've probably summarised the rest of that slide in what I just said, so I won't go over it. I'll just pop this one up. You can read it as I'm talking if you need to. So look, I think there's an opportunity to do more recruiting from regional and rural areas into teacher education. And we're particularly excited at Federation because tomorrow we're going down to Horsham and we're launching a new program that's now, and it's about to start its third week. And we've taken educational support staff from the Wimmera and we're running a course in Horsham 1 day a week. We're putting staff down to our Horsham campus and we're offering a teacher education degree down there, and we're being supported by the Education Department to do that. So we're currently 2 weeks in. We have 20 ES staff from the local schools around there, and they're retraining to be teachers. And as someone who comes from a regional area myself, I'm particularly excited about this project and what it might offer for regional and rural areas in the future. So if you're a principal out there and you're interested in your ES staff getting some teacher education, give us a call because it's a model that we think we can roll out more widely. Sharon, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I think that was a great summary, Jenene. I think we actually, of course, I've always got one thing to add after saying no. Even though, as you said at the start, this was all conducted prior to COVID, and now, you know, roll on 3 years or 4 years, and it's such a different environment. You know, no one would have anticipated it. But in fact, we still have the same anecdotal conversations with PSTs now that reflect all of that information. And I work a lot with the final years, you know, and they're looking at exiting and so forth, and they still make the same comments that when they went into schools where they felt supported and they felt part of the community, that made all the difference, had the highest impact on them as developing teachers. So I think even despite the shortage and despite the fact that You know, there's so many initiatives being thrown around. Our PSTs and our grads are still thinking and looking in the same way. I think that's only anecdotal. We'd have to do the study again, but that's certainly what I'm seeing. Thanks, Jenene.
And probably the thing I didn't say with that data of the students that we interviewed and sent the surveys to, about 95% of them in our undergraduate degrees were from regional and rural areas, and about half in our master's degrees. So what we're finding is that the students who are coming into our undergraduate degrees and doing education here at Federation are more likely to be country students, whereas the master's students less so. We're also finding the master's students are coming from all over the state now and all over the country, which is a new trend that we've noticed since the pandemic. And the other universities are telling me that the same things are happening there as well, and that they're starting to notice that as well. So I think we can draw a line under it there. I didn't think I'd get through all those slides so quickly, so I'm kind of happy that I have.
Thank you, Jenene and Sharon. Happy to take questions from anyone, or certainly Brendan or the two Daves. If you've got any questions for Jenene or Sharon, just shoot away.
I'll pipe up. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Jenene. We bumped into each other a little while ago, so it's a small world to see you again on this stage. Obviously, I work at Monash, and we've got a lot of international students. I can't remember your figures for internationals. What does it say for your uni and our uni for our international students that don't come from Victoria regional areas?
Yeah, that's a tricky one for us, because I think we've probably got about 5 international students in our undergraduate degrees, full stop. So this is not a big issue for us, although we do occasionally get an international student that we put down in the Gippsland campus, and they have a fantastic life down there. I guess the culture of country schools is might be a bit of a shock for some students, but then I also think the culture in city schools would be the same. It would also be quite different. So I don't know, David. I find that a little bit hard to answer. I think as long as the schools are welcoming, I think that it's really something that we could entertain.
I think just briefly from the Bairnsdale experience that Dave Love and I worked on closely with Mark last year, we had about 15 students, and they're probably half and half, international and domestic. And there certainly was a cultural divide in how those students carried themselves from the get-go to see how they actually got there. Most of the domestic students had their own transport. Most of the international students did not. But I think to a person, they really enjoyed their experience. I just wonder how on a much larger scale, especially if they have to source their own placements, how confident our international students are going to be to call a rural school, because at the moment our placement team find them a school for every placement. Yeah. More of a problem for Monash than Federation.
Sharon's probably better qualified to answer that, because she does a lot of the placements for the students, so she might have some thoughts.
Yeah, I was really just going to agree with what you said, David, because we have very few international students in the undergrad. We have a lot in the postgrad, and particularly postgrad early childhood and postgrad secondary for that hybrid program. But and what we see is exactly what you've just said. Firstly, the cultural differences really dictate the readiness and the willingness of the PST or the grad to involve themselves, or even to have the confidence, I should say, to involve themselves in the school setting. But secondly, I think that there's a lot, and it would be the same in any culture, but there's a lot of nuances, a lot of unwritten, unspoken social morae that is very difficult to pick up on. And we've learned over the years to be extremely explicit. And it's a little bit like when you go to the UK and, you know, the greeting there is, probably got it wrong now, but how are you, or something that they all say, and they're not really interested in no, they say, you okay? They're not really interested in that. It's just a greeting. And we have all of our own versions of that here, and culturally international students find it very difficult to you know, kind of fit in. And it doesn't take very much, I'm afraid, to say in a rural or a regional town to maybe confirm that some places are not as open and as multicultural and as positive an experience. We had one recently where we had a group in a rural town, and you know, this particular student who is Muslim overheard a comment while they were having dinner, you know, and that kind of coloured the entire way they then approached where they were looking. So they're minor things when we say them, but I think they're actually really incredibly important in terms of the confidence building, like you say, and are they going to reach out and apply for those positions? And I think there's some real space there for that building of confidence, but building of knowledge in order to be on an equal footing with people who are domestic students.
Thanks, Sharon. Brendan, did you have a question there?
Yeah, yes, thanks, Mark. Jenene and Brendan Ryan, I'm from Horsham and formerly principal in Horsham, and I was the senior education officer in Horsham. I'm quite interested in this idea of offering a degree in the Horsham area. I've noted that overseas there's been a move with some universities to look at an apprenticeship type model where the trainee teachers are actually working in the schools at the same time as completing their training. Now, I'm just interested in the model that you're setting up there in the Wimmera, and whether that is a model that could be replicated elsewhere around the state.
It could be, Brendan. We've gone for a different model though. The model that we've gone from is that the schools will be paying the ES wage to their staff on the 1 day a week that they're studying. So the schools are giving the students time release, paid time release. So the students come in on Thursdays. We have someone who drives down to Horsham who teaches them, and then we're paying for someone to be there every Thursday and to work with the students on their study skills and to help them with their assessments and to answer their questions and help them get onto Moodle and all that sort of thing. So I have that one-to-one, because what we've noticed with a lot of these students, and this is in no way derogatory comment, but a lot of these people haven't studied ever or for a long time. And we actually noticed, the first thing we noticed in week one was that they're meeting this with trepidation. They're a little bit nervous, and it's a big deal. So we want them to know that they can do this, that we've got their backs, that they've got this, and that we can support them through it. So they will be continuing to work in schools in their ES roles. In one case, someone is working in the accounts part of one of the local schools. And then we'll just work through their usual placements with them. But it's going to be a little bit of a step up for them in working as an ES staff member, and then suddenly they're in the classroom being a teacher. So we're giving them the opportunity to swap schools and to go, you know, if someone's from Horsham, pop down to Hamilton, do your placement there and swap with someone else so that Horsham gets someone else. And that way we kind of ease them into this, and they also get to see and experience other schools as well. Brendan, I don't know if you're in Horsham tomorrow and if you're doing anything at 11 o'clock, but if you pop down to C Building on the Horsham campus, come and have some scones with us, and we'll be opening the course at 11 o'clock, and we'd like anyone else who's in Horsham and would like to pop down and have a chat to us. We'll be there from 11 till 12, and we'll feed you and water you.
Yeah, thanks for the offer, but I'm down on the coast, unfortunately. Oh. And can I follow up with that question? The fact that you're delivering a program locally, I think, is critical in terms of attracting interest in the program. But one of my theories regarding the lack of retention with teachers is access to professional development, having hands-on experience. And I'm just wondering whether you've reflected on that in terms of retaining these pre-service teachers in the country locations. And I think, to be honest with you, if I can push the barrier of the CEP, the fact that we're providing online professional development, and it's been very attractive around the state to country teachers and leaders, I'm concerned about that issue in terms of retention.
Yeah, I understand. One thing that we are offering is a grad certificate in specialist teaching and also a grad diploma, no, not a grad diploma, a master's, which is 3 years part-time. The grad certificate's 1 year part-time. And we're offering the classes from 4 o'clock onwards in the evenings. So the whole cohort comes in remotely and we do the teaching and then they're out again. So they do that 2 nights a week for a year, and they'll have a graduate certificate, and we're offering those in all sorts of areas. But that degree is growing. And I think that probably addresses that need. You know, so they can do courses in trauma-informed practice or inclusive education, maths, science, literacy, TESOL. And we're really starting to see some good numbers in those programs for offering those sorts of things. But we can also offer smaller, more compact types of professional learning if schools are interested.
Thanks, Jenene. Thanks, Brendan. Just one last question before we head to the next 2 speakers. In your presentation, the areas that were highlighted about some of the key factors why pre-service teachers or grad teachers stay or go to rural settings in the first place. What level do you think the schools have that knowledge of those factors? And I would say anecdotally, I feel it's definitely increased, and it's much more of a factor than maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Schools can see that it's really important to go above and beyond. But just wondering what you see. Do you think schools actually have an understanding, or is it something that you share or the placement officers from the university share when placing PSTs?
Well, we've not shared that slide before, actually, except with the Education Department, and we did send that off in our report. But I was actually surprised by those results because I thought that they'd be interested in the reputation of the school. I thought that they'd be interested in the social opportunities. I didn't think that the quality of the school leadership and the quality of the school mentoring program would be 2 of the points that came out on top for young teachers. So I think that I probably would have been paying them extra money and I would have been sucked into that. But that's not what they're asking for. They want to build good, strong careers, and they're looking for the support to do that. And that really did surprise me. It surprised everyone on the team, actually, because we thought that they'd go for the extra money. But it shows that they're actually looking for something a little bit different. They come into teaching for the reasons that people often come into teaching, because they want to work with people. They know that education's transformative. They want to get that thrill out of, igniting passion in children and things like that. And that is where they're coming from. They want to live a good life, and they want to progress their careers and develop a happy, healthy career.
Thanks, Jenene, and thank you. Yeah, go,
if
Sharon.
I could add one thing, because I think, as Jenene alluded to before, I probably sit in a position where I liaise a lot, and Mark, you'll know that from your old days in the schools, and probably it has stood out to me over 15 years. The schools. There are 2 main reasons, I think. One, the schools that are really clued in to, and as Jenene just said, it's not only about rolling out the welcome mat. I mean, that is part of it. We all want to feel welcomed and valued, but it is about that environment, isn't it? Is this a place where I can grow and learn and contribute and have an impact? But so schools, I think, who are aware of that have always been the ones where PSTs or grads talk and share that information, and we'll have students asking to go to those schools. So I think there have been a lot of schools, but often the same schools, Mark, that I've noticed over the years, because they've switched onto that really early, and they're able to provide that welcome and that knowledge and that sense of belonging to the PSTs when they're there on placement. Of course, they return to work often down the track. So I think then you'll have other schools who possibly, like, I'm pretty old, and when I started teaching, you didn't get a choice. You just got sent somewhere and you went there and you did your time. You certainly didn't argue. And I know that often what happens, maybe what sometimes there are still people who might think, and I certainly, once thought like that, well, you should just be lucky that counting your lucky stars, you've got a job and this is where you're going. But of course, everyone's moved on, haven't they, from that thought pattern, and now it's the other approach that, of course, really packs a punch.
Certainly a buyer's market at the moment, Sharon. Yes. Thank you both so much. We'll quickly jump ship now. CEP was involved in a teacher rural placement in Bairnsdale in November, December that placed 14 pre-service teachers from Monash University in the town of Bairnsdale, and Gow from Monash University was one of the supports in place, and David Love was the CEP mentor involved in that program, who were both there. And interestingly enough, out of the 14 who were there, I think there might only been one who had a semi-rural regional background. So David Gow may be able to correct me. The majority would have been from a metro and / international background. So I will get them to introduce themselves, but the key question that we just want to hear from both of them, we might go to David Gow first, is what anecdotally they believe are the key elements to young grad teachers, pre-service teachers, being attracted to a rural placement, but also a graduate teacher role in a rural or regional setting. Just really keen, but please just introduce yourself and give your background as well, because we'd be interested. David Gow, over to you first.
Thanks. So brief introduction, career teacher, last 4 years at Monash University, supporting pre-service teachers in a role titled Professional Practice Consultant. But basically we just do pre-placement workshops to help them understand the expectations, teaching volume, teaching load, measurement against the APSTs. We come out and do school visits. So that's basically how Mark and Dave saw me. I came out primarily to visit the students in their school site. A good bit of the CEP program, I suppose, was the extra social activities they attached to their programs with mentor evenings, barbecues, pizzas. I'm just picking up on that social element you talked about with sport, and one of the slides Jenene had. I think Dave's weekend kind of running sheet of this is on. There's a trivia night here at the pub, or there's a races here, or there's a fate or a secondhand, whatever, car boot sale. I think that's something we don't do when we go to other rural placements. So Monash run rural placements at the Bass Coast and Mildura. This was the first time we went to Bairnsdale, and CEP did a lot of the heavy lifting for me. So it was a fantastic experience for me, supported by, I think, Dave Love being on the ground 24/7 for 3 weeks. We would fly in and fly out of Mildura for a couple of days. We would drive in and drive down to Bass Coast, perhaps 2 or 3 PPCs, to get out and see a lot bigger group, probably 40 or 50 students rather than 13. In terms of answering your question, I think Chloe, who was supposed to be here tonight or was going to be here tonight, she was one from a rural, along with Tom. Tom was from a rural area. Chloe was attracted to a rural area. She also had a partner who I think was a tradesperson, and they could see a lot of lifestyle attraction for that kind of thing. Internationals kept most of their thoughts to themselves as a group. But as an experience, they really loved it. I don't think they were already a long way from home, the internationals, to then take them away, I suppose, from a capital city is another stretch again. But certainly the positivity was amazing. You've got your data for surveys, and it'd be interesting to see what actually does happen in terms of retention and things. But if I briefly talk about attraction, they were all going before they got their grant. They got the big grant 2 days ahead of when they went. So that was a sweetener. Those numbers will be a lot stronger this year because Bairnsdale was the highest paid per day placement that we have of the rural programs, which might then have a negative effect on the ones that aren't paid so well. I also wonder, moving forward with the bigger guidelines to pay all placements, what that then means for rural placements. I know that CEP also has funding that's limited to a certain time span at the moment. It's not ongoing. So they were going without the sweetener, but that will attract more people this year. In terms of the kickers to get them there, I think having past students do the sort of testimonial speeches and spruik it, we all know it, we all love it. I guess I'm semi-regional, a little place called Mornington I'm from. It doesn't have a train station. It was counted as Melbourne for the COVID lockdowns, but we're pretty much semi-regional rural. I think word of mouth from students to get them out of, as you say, the burbs is as good as we can do for them to get out and see it, because internationals may not have been there at all. And some of our local regional students need to go to the other side of the coast. For example, I think we had Tom who was from Warrnambool, but he just loved Gippsland. He was loving it. So attraction, student testimonials, payment helps, but that's problematic working forwards for where the payments will go. Beyond that, having someone on the ground for the duration, I think, is an absolute golden experience for those students to have. Because he wasn't just a handyman around the caravan park, you were the social organizer. You can talk the talk for teaching, and the students loved you. That's me.
Thanks, Dave. Gow. And Dave Love, when you respond, don't be afraid to include your time in the York Peninsula as a principal. You would have had young teachers come over there, and some stay, some go. Just interested to what makes them stay. But you're on mute, Dave. But unmute and go ahead.
Hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
We can.
All right, beautiful, thank you. Look, my brief history is I've been in education for 44 years in South Australia. 4 in the city, the rest have been out in the country. So I come with a wealth of knowledge from and experience from remote and isolated communities, Aboriginal communities, large secondary schools in large industrial towns, York Peninsula, Spencer Gulf, up that way, Whyalla. But basically, as a leader as well as a teacher. So I've taught reception through to year 12 across everything over the course of my career. So I've got a wealth of knowledge, I guess, about what communities operate like, what country communities need, what they love, and how to get people to fit in with communities, and what's important for people to go there, and what anyway, basically. So I've got a passion, I guess, basically to get people from wherever into the country to give our kids out in the country the best teaching experiences they can get from good professionals. I loved the time there. Sure, it wasn't all hell on earth, believe me, at Bairnsdale for 3 or 4 weeks trying to negotiate all of those and coordinate all of those things. But there was some interesting groups set ups there, weren't there, David, with and Mark, with the internationals and what their expectations were. But it was a really good experience for them to actually just engage in country life. Even some of the local Melbourne kids hadn't been out of home before to go and work somewhere, and that was really important for them to experience that too. And they left, I think, with reasonably good experience there. I've got some bit of data here that I want to share with you, that a bit of a rating sheet that I gave them at the end of it. And one of the most important things that they got out of it was that the mentor teachers and principals, of the support they got from them, which ties in beautifully with what you were talking about before with your reports, and the support from David and Monash and Swinburne was really good. And I asked them if they planned to keep an open mind about teaching in the country, and 93% said yes, they would. And 71% were definitely had a desire to teach in the country, and 93% said they'd love to get involved with the Teach Rural program again because of the experience they've had. But David covered all the educational side, but I was mainly there. I mean, I went to support them in schools as well, and be there from time to time. But organising the stuff, like getting them to go out to Lindenow Primary and see a fundraising night where the whole community was into the bowling club and having raffles and doing that sort of stuff, that you just have to get a feel for the community from those sorts of experiences. That to me was some of the most important stuff that I worked with there, just getting them out to get a feel of what it was really like to be in some of those communities, grassroots stuff really, and experience that. And they love those experiences. We hit some wineries, we did a few other things as well, as you wouldn't always enjoy that. But I can't think of anyone that wouldn't have left after that Teach Rural program thinking they wouldn't want to go back and dip their toe in the water again in the country for an experience. Can you,
And
David?
Dave, I just want to emphasise the Lindenhoe Trivia Night. You really emphasised how important it was.
Yeah.
The look that everyone got out there and supported that, and then that replicated itself when the Bairnsdale Secondary had a music recital night. I don't think you really had to push that at all. That was the group who.
It was a very interesting. The team just stuck together. They really were a beautiful team together. They bonded really well and supported each other. We went to that for the Lindenhoe one for one of the students. We went to a music, as you said, a recital for another student. Yeah, and a fundraiser for another group, and assemblies for another one. So a big Christmas assembly. We all went and watched teachers, PSTs, work with their kids up on stage there. So all of that stuff was really good. But I don't speak that well publicly, I'm afraid. I'm a doer, not a talker, as you probably noticed. But yeah, that's how I go. But I've done it for 44 years. Very passionate about the country, and I would hope that we would get realistically 4 out of that 14 or 15 to reconnect with country as a result. So,
thank you, Dave Lavin, Dave Gow. It became a bit of a running joke that we had the two Daves down there supporting that group of free service teachers. And I will say that partnership between university and CEP was outstanding, and really that was the positive comment, I think, from all the PSTs about that wraparound support, and that's probably what's needed.
I know they're catching up again soon, that group.
There you go.
Yeah, as a group.
They'll stay connected forever. So thank you. I shall pass back to Brendan Ryan at this point to wrap up today's session.
Thanks very much, Mark. And can I also thank our speakers, Jenene and Sharon from the Fed Uni, and Dave and David for coming along today. It's been a most interesting session. I'll remind everybody that today's session has been recorded, so you can view the session online, and please promote the session to people that you come in contact with. I make the point that next week's session, which is the third in the autumn series, has a focus on flexible learning options. In other words, what are the alternative settings that are available around our schools at the moment. There'll be some explanation of those options and looking at valuing students' background in terms of establishing those settings. Very important topic, and I would encourage people to register for that session. The poll is in the chat box, so please complete the survey. And now, before you sign off, Mark?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. Promoting next term already, really excited. There's 2 sessions that we've locked away. There's a Women in Leadership session where we've got 3 amazing speakers, all with a story to tell, including one international. And we've also got one of the FedU colleagues, Peter Vanplay, is going to talk about AI in education, which is, he's just confirmed today, so we're really excited already. So PD Online, we're looking great for next term as well. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, Mark. So please complete that survey before you sign off. That concludes today's session. Thank you to everybody for your participation today. Bye for now.